The email confirmation pinged on my phone, a little thrill of anticipation bubbling in my chest. "Your Airbnb stay in Blackwood Forest is confirmed," it declared, followed by a laundry list of details about check-in procedures and, most importantly, the promise of unparalleled tranquility and breathtaking views. Perfect. Exactly what I needed to escape the soul-crushing monotony of my life in the city. I was in desperate need of a reset. My job was draining me. My relationship had crumbled months ago, and I felt like I was just drifting, a ghost in my own life. Blackwood Forest, with its promise of isolation and natural beauty, seemed like the perfect antidote. The pictures online showed a charming, rustic cabin nestled deep within the woods, surrounded by towering pines and a perpetually misty landscape. It looked like something straight out of a fairy tale, albeit a slightly gothic one. The drive was longer than expected, the GPS leading me down increasingly narrow and overgrown roads. By the time I finally reached the turnoff for the cabin, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and an unsettling silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the occasional rustle in the undergrowth. The cabin itself was even more isolated than I had imagined. It sat in a small clearing, surrounded by a wall of trees that seemed to press in on all sides. The exterior was weathered and worn, the wood a deep, almost black color. The porch sagged slightly, and one of the windows was boarded up, giving the place a distinctly dilapidated feel. It was charming in a spooky, historical kind of way. I wrestled my bag out of the trunk and fumbled with the lockbox, finally managing to extract the key after a few frustrating minutes. The door creaked open with a groan that echoed through the silent woods, and I stepped inside. The interior was surprisingly cozy, despite the disrepair of the exterior. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, and the room was furnished with a comfortable-looking sofa and a couple of well-worn armchairs. A thick rug covered the floor, and the walls were lined with bookshelves filled with dusty, leather-bound volumes. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and something else, something musty and indefinable that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I spent the first hour unpacking and exploring the cabin. The kitchen was small but functional, with a vintage stove and a chipped porcelain sink. Upstairs, there was a single bedroom with a large, four-poster bed and a window that overlooked the forest. The view was indeed breathtaking, a sea of green stretching out as far as the eye could see, but the growing darkness made it feel more ominous than peaceful. As night fell, the cabin seemed to shrink around me. The silence outside was oppressive, and every creak and groan of the old house sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I built a fire in the fireplace, hoping the warmth and light would chase away the creeping sense of unease that was settling over me. I tried to read, but I couldn't concentrate. The words blurred on the page, and my mind kept wandering back to the unsettling atmosphere of the cabin. I kept imagining things, shadows moving in the corners of my eyes, whispers on the wind. I told myself it was just my imagination, fueled by the isolation and the darkness, but a part of me knew that something was not right. Around midnight, I decided to go to bed. I double-checked all the doors and windows, making sure they were locked tight. Then, I climbed the creaking stairs to the bedroom and slipped under the covers. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, and I drifted off to sleep relatively quickly. But my sleep was restless, filled with strange and unsettling dreams. I dreamt of shadowy figures lurking in the forest, of whispers carried on the wind, and of a cold, clammy hand reaching out to me from the darkness. I woke up with a gasp, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was dark, but I could hear a faint sound coming from downstairs, a rhythmic, scraping sound that sent a shiver down my spine. I held my breath, listening intently. The sound continued, growing louder with each passing second. It sounded like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Terror gripped me. I knew I wasn't alone. Something was in the cabin with me. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely grip it. I fumbled with the screen, trying to turn on the flashlight. Finally, the beam of light flickered to life, illuminating the room. I held the phone out in front of me, slowly scanning the room. Nothing. just the familiar shapes of the furniture, the shadows cast by the moonlight filtering through the window. The scraping sound continued, even louder now. It was definitely coming from downstairs. I knew I should stay put, call the police, wait for help to arrive. But I couldn't. The fear was too overwhelming, the need to know what was making that sound too compelling. Slowly, cautiously, I crept out of bed and made my way to the door. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening for any other sounds. Nothing, just the scraping, growing louder with each passing moment. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and opened the door. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon through the window at the end of the hall. I started down the stairs, my hand gripping the railing tightly. The scraping sound was deafening now, filling the entire cabin. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw it. In the living room, silhouetted against the flickering light of the dying embers in the fireplace, was a figure, tall and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs and a head that seemed too large for its body. It was dragging something across the floor, something heavy, something that scraped and groaned with each movement. I couldn't make out what it was dragging, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was something terrible. The figure stopped moving, its head slowly turning towards me. I couldn't see its face in the darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me. Cold, empty eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness and into my very soul. A low growl rumbled from the figure's chest, a sound that made my blood run cold. It started to move towards me, its long, spindly limbs moving with a strange, unnatural grace. I screamed, a primal scream of terror that echoed through the silent woods. I turned and fled, scrambling back up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it, then threw myself against it, trying to keep whatever was on the other side from getting in. The doorknob rattled, and the door shuddered violently. The figure was trying to get in. I screamed again, louder this time, and grabbed my phone. I fumbled with the screen, trying to dial 911, but my hands were shaking too badly. The door splintered, wood cracking and splintering under the force of the assault. I knew it wouldn't hold for long. Desperate, I looked around the room for something to use as a weapon. My eyes landed on a heavy, cast-iron candlestick on the bedside table. I grabbed it and held it tight, my knuckles white. The door finally gave way, splintering into pieces. The figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the darkness of the hallway. It stepped into the room, its long, spindly limbs moving with that same unnatural grace. I could see its face now, illuminated by the faint light of the moon. It was a face that would haunt my nightmares forever. Pale and gaunt, with sunken eyes and a mouth twisted into a grotesque leer. Its teeth were long and sharp, like those of a predator. It raised its hand, its long, bony fingers reaching out towards me. I screamed and swung the candlestick, hitting it square in the face. The figure staggered back, momentarily stunned. I didn't waste any time. I ran past it, out the broken door and down the stairs. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands still shaking, and finally managed to unlock the door. I jumped inside, slammed the door shut, and started the engine. I didn't look back as I drove away, speeding down the narrow, winding road, away from the cabin, away from the forest, away from the nightmare I had just experienced. I drove all night, not stopping until I reached the city. I checked into a hotel and collapsed onto the bed, exhausted and terrified. I spent the next few days trying to make sense of what had happened. Was it a dream, a hallucination, or had I really encountered something evil in that cabin in the woods? I never went back to Blackwood Forest. I never told anyone what happened. I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, that they would think I was crazy. But I know what I saw. I know what I experienced, and I will never forget it. The memory of the creepy Airbnb cabin in Blackwood Forest will forever be etched in my mind. A dark and terrifying reminder of the horrors that lurk in the shadows, waiting to prey on the unsuspecting. The tranquility I sought was replaced by a terror I could never have imagined, and the breathtaking views were forever tainted by the face of the nightmare that awaited me in the darkness. The perfect reset turned into a permanent scar, a chilling testament to the fact that some places are best left undisturbed, some doors are best left unopened, and some promises of unparalleled tranquility are nothing more than a siren's call to the abyss.